Hello, my name is Fern Master. I was born November 30th, 1891, right here in Kelso, to Elmer J. Master and Mary Fern Master. Fern was my mother's maiden name. They were both from western Pennsylvania and came out here in early 1891 right after they got married. A lot of their friends and neighbors had come out here in the previous couple years to work in the Collins lumber camp up at Ostrander. Pa decided he'd rather work in a mill here in town rather than be up in the woods away from me and Ma. He bought us a house in town at 4th and Vine Streets. Later on, when the city began to put addresses on things, the house was 314 Vine Street. I don't remember the big flood of 1894, as I was only 2.5, but the high water left marks a couple feet high in the house. My folks would tell stories about going to the grocery in a boat, how they had to move what furniture they could up to the little room upstairs, and trying to clean up all the mess afterwards. Apparently all of South Kelso was several feet underwater from the backed-up Cowlitz and Coweeman rivers. In '03, Pa decided that he'd had enough mill work and went in as a partner in a grocery store. It was on Ash Street, a block and a half away from the railroad depot. It was a typical neighborhood grocery, but we did some good business, with railroad passengers coming over from the depot. After a couple years, Pa's partner, J.S. Robb, left to start a saloon, so the store became E. Master and Son. In addition to clerking, I also did the bookkeeping. My responsibilities at the store pretty much ended my formal education at the 8th grade. I also liked going to the local theaters to see traveling shows. The Kelso Theater and the Vogue Theater were great for live shows, but the Edison Theater had the better moving picture equipment and musicians. In late 1916, a pair of sisters, Laura and Mary Gatton, moved to Kelso from Portland to join the ensemble playing for movies at the Edison. I soon became sweet on Laura and started calling on her regularly. A little more than a month after America joined the Great War, in May of 1917, Laura and I, and Mary and her boyfriend Art, decided to take a pleasure trip up to British Columbia in my car. Or so we told our friends. Instead of going all the way there, though, we stopped in Chehalis, found a Presbyterian minister, and had ourselves a nice little double ceremony. Boy, were our friends surprised on our return. It was only 2 weeks later that I had to register for the draft. Tuesday, June 5th, 1917, was conscription day nationwide, where all men aged 21 to 30 were supposed to register with their local examination board. Nearly 1,000 of us were registered in Cowlitz County. We were then each assigned a number, which would correspond to a random number drawing, which they did back in D.C. They told all of us we would eventually be called and that this draft number system would just establish the order in which we were called. I found out that my number was 405th of the Cowlitz County men. At first they only called up the first 120 men for examination. They expected a lot of exemptions. Common exemptions were not being physically fit, having dependent children, or working an essential job. Married men without children were refused exemption on those grounds alone. If you were called and failed to show up for the exam board, you were automatically enlisted, and then the sheriff would find you and put you on a train direct to the big camp at American Lake. Waiting to be called up turned to worrying when I read the front page story of the Kelsonian on May 25th, 1918. It said that starting July 1st, all draft-age men must either work in an essential occupation or fight. This order was primarily aimed at gamblers, layabouts, day laborers, but the list also included store clerks. My job. I would have to go into the Army. Then, a week later, a glimmer of hope. There was a call for special service volunteers. These men would get training for specialized home front or behind-the-lines jobs. Me and Laura talked it over and decided that this would be my best chance to avoid combat. On Saturday, June 8th, 1918, I presented myself to the examination board in Kalama and volunteered for the mechanical training school in Pullman. I left on July 14th for the 3-month training. When I got there, they had more need for radio operators than mechanics, so they shifted me to the Army radio training. I found I had a natural aptitude for it, and I finished the 3-month training in about 1 month. In August, they transferred me to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, where I was commissioned a sergeant in the Army Signal Corps. The encampment was massive. Tent cities sprawled for miles around the fort. Many Army units formed from the Midwest were there for basic training, but there were also a lot of units, like mine, that were there from all over the West and were there to get specialized training. If a soldier had to leave his unit, he might get lost trying to find his way back. It was such a beehive. 2 months after I got there, in October, this strange sickness started going around. In a big camp like that, you couldn't really stop it from spreading. I managed to avoid it until the end of the month, when it grabbed onto me and laid me low. The doctors called it pneumonia because it was attacking my lungs. It was really an early variation of the Spanish flu. It killed me on October 26, 1918. I was the first member of my battalion to die, so they gave me a military funeral there, and the entire battalion escorted my body to the train taking my body to Kelso. I was buried here with a graveside service on November 1st, 1918, just 10 days before the armistice.